go to questions. And really, the ground rules are, if you have questions, I think you can submit some too, and they're going to pick out the ones. And then toward the end, we're going to do a speed round. And I would stay as long as possible, but we got another one of these over at Rockwall. Do a speed round, and we've compiled the toughest, nastiest, and meanest questions. And we're going to try to answer them all, because that's about America. All right, so here we go. I also just had a very recent, in fact about 30 seconds ago, a glass malfunction where I got one, but we're gonna make it work because I am the student of 2 school teachers. Thank you. I got a big nose, so hopefully that'll work. Thank you. Look at that, that's a good team member. Oh, I mean, I can't read that. I was getting dizzy as soon as I put those on. All right, this will work. All right, that's a little more than me, but that's okay. No, listen, so what I wanted to emphasize very quickly, I'm good on the eyeballs, thank you. Doge has absolutely no authority to decide about who gets hired and who gets fired. That's a misconception. Now, by the way, you might have noticed that the press will lie to you on more than one occasion. The last one that just infuriated me was there was a headline, I think it came out of Politico or something, that said that President Trump had propositioned a female congresswoman. That was essentially the theme of the headline. The truth is, he said to her on his airplane between his presidencies, because she was 8 months pregnant and they were very good friends, her husband was by her side and right with her, that, hey, and she said she wasn't feeling well, I have a bedroom in the back of the plane, go ahead and use it if you'd like. And then he jokingly said, because they're friends, in front of her husband, but don't tell Melania, she gets jealous, like, haha, right? And that's what they reported. And I just can't stand that. You know, hold us to account for sure, and if we do something wrong, get it. But don't take that and they say, well, we didn't report anything on. You have to report not only truth, but truth in context. I think that's very fair. And having been a target of it myself, it infuriates you when it's not truth in context. Now, President Trump's had it times 100,000. I can just imagine what he's going through. But be that as it may. So, truth. So what Doge is doing is they're trying to, we got to balance the budget. I was doing some research for this. We took in last fiscal year $4.9 trillion, and we're spending $6.75 trillion. Tell me how that is sustainable. And it's not. We've been addicted to getting services, $1 worth of services, and paying about 80 cents for it. And there's going to become a day of reckoning. I ran for Congress to try and do 2 things, and they're pushing boulders up hills. But one was to secure the border, because if you're not safe, then you're not free. And the other was to try to get to a point where we could actually balance the federal budget. Wouldn't that be something? And I have to tell you, I don't think those should be. They shouldn't be partisan issues. Those should be things that any American would want to do, because we want to know who's coming into our country, and legal migration, I think, makes us stronger. But I digress. So that's the first thing. So Elon Musk has not hired or fired anyone. That's what the press will tell you, but it's not true. Now, the Doge has claimed in the last, they've only been around for 2 months, that they've already saved $55 billion. Now, I can say, I saved $155 billion, but I want to see the proof as well. Like President Reagan taught us, trust, but verify. Right? I think that's fair. And I was able to, because I'm on the Doge committee, we met with Mr. Musk himself for about an hour. And there was just 11 of us in the room, and we had a very candid conversation about what they've been finding. And what they've been finding is alarming. And again, proof's in the pudding. And the press will say, well, where's the proof? They just got in there. So the way Doge works is each different agency will hire employees that will look to fulfill the Doge mission. And they go through all of the proper vetting. I have that specifically here. But what we hear so much, particularly on the Doge committee ourselves, our Democratic friends will say, unelected billionaire. Well, he is a billionaire and he's not elected. You know who else was unelected? The entire cabinet that Joe Biden picked. They weren't elected. Elections have consequences. And President Trump won with 77.3 million votes, and he wants one of the smartest people in the world to, I don't know, maybe save us some money. That's not a bad idea. And you know how much he's getting paid? Nothing. He's a very wealthy man already. 400,000 billion. And by the way, if you're a billionaire, are you evil? Are you evil? Because it seems, yes, the left, there are people that think because you're a billionaire, you're evil. What if I make delicious cheeseburgers and you love my cheeseburger and you come and eat and everybody else wants cheeseburgers? I might make $1 billion. Does that make me evil? No, it just means I made some damn good cheeseburgers. I don't play the class warfare game. Some people want to, that's on them. So we got a very smart person that's willing to help our country.
He's not smart.
All right. So, and I find it also interesting that the liberal billionaires aren't bad. It's the conservative ones that love our country. How dare you? Okay. So, the Doge, Doge is very transparent. They have been posting on X and updates. Okay. And they're updating on their website, usually daily. And each agency, this is how it works. Each agency is onboarding employees and they're focused on carrying out the DOE's mission. They go through the proper PPO onboarding and they have the appropriate security clearances depending on what they do. They must abide by the already established procedures to ensure that sensitive data is data. Now you can believe what the media says. Doesn't mean it's true. So there's a 2023 audit. The CNN and MSNBC won't tell you that 919 people in the IRS, this 2023 audit, have full unmasked access already to all of our taxpayer data. 919 people already have it, 20 of which were quote unquote student researchers. Now the media never told you that. And what Doge is trying to do is take 1 or 2 additional people to have that access. And now suddenly the sky's gonna fall. That is hyperbolic and that is ridiculous.
Crap.
Now, let's talk about the hiring freeze. The order exempted personnel who have functions critical to national security, public safety, law enforcement, and immigration. And you saw some very dishonest people in the media after that tragedy at DCA at Reagan Airport, where the helicopter collided with the aircraft, and they said it's Donald Trump's fault because he's cutting the federal workforce. That is absurd. Now, one FAA air traffic controller has been fired due to Doge. It's just dishonest. And I want to point out dishonesty when you see it. So I thought that was very ridiculous. Okay. Now let's take a look at some of the things that Doge has already done. See if you agree with these things or not. Department of Education canceled 29 DEI contracts. And it saved $101 million. One of which was decolonizing the curriculum. I don't know what the hell that is. But that workshop was going to cost $15 million. So
maybe you should find out what
How
it
about
means.
this?
Yeah, don't tell them where they came from.
Maybe it was important.
How about we act like adults and not children? There's decorum.
Then quit calling out people that are as liars.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to have a town hall and answer questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, so there was an $890 million contract that was about to be signed. Seriously, look at this, listen. If you think that this was something that we should have signed, we're gonna spend $890 million of our collective money on a contract with the National Park Service, because after you visit a national park, they wanted to do pop-up ads to ask you about your experience. They were gonna spend $890 million to do that. How much would SurveyMonkey cost? You can do that for pennies on the dollar. Why is that a bad thing? That's something that we should look into, and I'm very glad that that happened. You know what wouldn't have happened? They didn't try to do this under Joe Biden's administration. And I'm glad that they're trying to do it now. The Veterans Affairs, just because we cut the Veterans Affairs budget, or they cut their own, doesn't mean we're gonna hurt veterans. We probably will help veterans. I'm a veteran.
You will hurt veterans. You will hurt veterans.
364, we're not talking about veteran services, we're talking about admin costs and things of that nature. And what's the mission? Is the mission of the VA to hire people, or is it to serve veterans? It's to serve veterans. So their own staff, they have a 364. Okay, listen. No.
Everyone in this audience right now agreed to keep it respectful. Did you not? What were the consequences going to be if you did not keep it
We need
respectful?
to move on.
That's okay.
We need to move
I mean, I'm cool with you guys booing or cheering. I don't care. But we should have, there is probably 300 people here. And I just think it's very arrogant and very narcissistic to demand the stage. If you want the stage, run for Congress.
Here.
So the thought would be then, the VA has a $364 billion budget. Is it going to be better if it was $480 billion? The federal government can waste money with the best of them. I worked for the federal government. I was in the Air Force. And what I saw was a lot of waste, particularly on the civilian side. There's just too many people sometimes working in one job. And so when you fire somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't deserve it. Or I had a small business with 100 employees, and I knew we weren't working at maximum efficiency. So if you believe that the federal government with 2.4 million employees is working at maximum perfect efficiency, we're just going to disagree on a lot of things, because they clearly aren't. And I think we have some evidence to prove. But the Secretary of the VA, he reviewed 90,000 contracts worth 9,000 worth $67 billion. And he's already saved $1 billion. So I think that's a good thing. Let's talk about Medicaid and Medicare. This is something near and dear to my heart. I was on the Human Services Committee when I was in the Texas House. And we had the IG come to us once. And this was in 2013, so a bit dated on the numbers, but 12 years ago. And he told us then that there was about $5 billion being wasted in fraud, waste, and abuse. There's criminal organizations out there that figure out how to game the system and steal our money. I want to investigate that. I don't think, again, that should be partisan at all. We got some opposition from some of the Democratic members of the House, and I never really understood why. Because if we can get that money back, we're going to have more funds for folks that are eligible for those services. And so I met with them 2 weeks ago, and they said Texas spends $50 billion total on entitlements, and about anywhere on the low end of 10%, on the high end of 20%. These are people that have been doing this job for 25 to 30 years. 10 to 15 to 20% of it, that's fraudulent. And we need to look into that, and we need to recover that money, and those people need to be punished. And most of the time, because some of the questions we got were, what are we going to do for the people that we catch stealing this kind of money, or wasting it or abusing it? Most of the time, they just get civil penalties. They don't get criminal penalties, and I think that's unfortunate, but it is the way that it is. So then we've got income verification for Medicaid. That is another very good thing. We want to make sure you're eligible to get the benefit. Now, with the advent of quantum computing and AI, we can take what used to take weeks and make it days. So what we've, in a sense, done is people that truly need it can get the benefit faster. Why is that a bad thing? I personally don't think it is. Here's some things that I do believe are very fraudulent, and I wanted to visit with you on. There were 20 contracts that were canceled on February 3rd with $26 million for executive coaching and strategic communication. There were 10 agencies that cut 586 contracts on the 14th of February that saved $445 million. On March 1st, there were 128 contracts canceled that saved $60 million, one of which was $3.5 million for larval fish monitoring. I don't know what that is, but we just took that money back. Health and Human Services saved $182 million in administrative related expenses, which means no services were cut, including $168 grand that was going to go to the Anthony Fauci exhibit at the NIH Museum. I didn't even know they had a museum. I think that in and of itself is not a core function of the federal government, and that should be cut entirely. There were 22 contracts that saved $44 million that were canceled due to underutilized leases in federal buildings. Do you realize that over the last several years, only 6% of your federal employees go to work 40 hours a week and show up at work? That's startling to me. If you take out maintenance and security, it goes down to 1%. That again is very troubling to me. I want you to go to work because there's a reason why you actually go to work. You can work with you can create synergy with your fellow employees and esprit de corps, and you can create something called synergy. That's why there are office buildings. That's why you actually function and go to work. And I thought this was funny. 2 years after COVID ended, our Democratic friends wanted to protect federal employees to make sure they could still work from home, even the ones that worked in warehouses. I don't know how you can do your warehouse job at your house.
That's a
But
lie.
there it is. Also, and again, I'm just curious because you don't learn things from people you agree with most of the time. Many times you learn things from people that see things a different way. Do you think it's fair for the federal employees to get 12 weeks off every year for sick leave?
Yes.
12 weeks, 3 full months for sick leave, but they don't necessarily have to be sick. They can have a family member that's sick that they provide care for, or even a friend or neighbor.
Sure.
Well, hell, then if you think 3 months, why not the whole 12 months? Why don't
That's
you just
stupid.
I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You have to draw a line in the sand at some point. And
You wanna
that's why,
cancel family
honestly,
medical
Kamala Harris
leave.
got smoked in the election in November.
Then you want to
It's
cancel
just
it.
2 months. It's just too
Yeah.
far. I have many friends that didn't ever vote for a Republican candidate, and they just had enough and just pushed too far. You've got to draw a line in the sand. I understand
Yeah, like
why the
don't vote for
Democrats
black
do it
women.
now, and it's I don't try to be cynical, but most federal employees vote for their party, so I get it. They protect them. Virginia is a blue state now because they have so many federal employees that live in Northern Virginia. It's just a fact. It's unfortunate because you should hold them all to account. We should hold our military to account. We need to. Several questions that we got, so I'll just preempt one, which was we got maybe 10 asked relatively the same question, which was, why are you picking on the civilian parts of the federal government? Are you going to look into the military? Fair question. I'm on the Armed Services Committee and have been. This is my 5th year. Hell yeah, we're going to look at the military because there's been. I mean, you're talking almost $1 trillion budget. We need to make sure they spend that money efficiently as well. And to be fair to the military, a lot of the time, historically, it's been Congress's fault because they've wanted to say sometimes close certain bases, or they've wanted to get rid of a legacy weapons program, and because it would be more efficient. And Congress tells them no. So you got to look at Congress too. We got to doge ourselves, and you have to hold ourselves to account also. But we do need to look at that. There are threats out there. China, I think, is the obvious #1 threat. Internally, our debt is a huge threat to our existential existence moving forward. But Russia's a huge threat. They got 5,000 nuclear weapons. You know who's not a threat? Billionaires, because they create opportunity. And they create. You ever work for a poor guy? Because I never have.
For
Just saying.
themselves,
Our new ally?
Trickle down don't work.
You work for a poor guy?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, here's some other, I thought there was, the Social Security Administration saved $1 million by canceling a contract they had for Gender X Initiative marker. I don't know what that is. NASA
And
saved
find out.
$500,000 because they canceled their Politico subscriptions. I think that's a good thing. We saved $784 million because we did not build a brand new embassy in South Sudan. I think that's good for every taxpayer in this room. The Department of Education canceled 29 contracts, saved $101 million, including one that cost $15 million for decolonizing the curriculum. That was a workshop. I don't know what that is. How about this? $1.5 million for DEI initiatives in Serbia, $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a trans opera in Colombia, and $32,000 for trans comic books in Peru. I don't think that's good use of the taxpayer
Those are
dollars. I
pennies.
just don't. And then this
Pennies
one,
of the budget.
at a hearing we had on I think it was the oversight or DOE, the Democratic witness, in the majority, when you're the majority party in the House, you usually have anywhere between 2 and 4 witnesses, and then you give the minority an opportunity to have 1 witness. Except there were times where the Democrats wouldn't allow us to have any witnesses, so we didn't show up for the hearing. But that fortunately was not that common. So the Democratic witness, I asked him, Do you think it was a good use of taxpayer dollars to spend $2 million for trans surgeries in Guatemala? And he wouldn't answer it first.
Because it's not true.
Is anybody here, show of hands, that thinks that's a good use of taxpayer money? I'm just curious. Well, it did, because we actually cited the code in Joe Biden's budget where it did. So we had definitive proof. He acquiesced, because that's what he said too. He played that game with me for a minute and said,
So you signed the budget.
and then we said, well, I have it here, and here's the code and the proof. And he goes, okay, yes, then it did happen. I said, all right. And he finally acknowledged, in his opinion, it was a good use of taxpayer money. And I encourage the Democrats to continue like that, because they're going to lose more and more elections.
I'd watch.
So we got questions. Let's go. Go ahead.
Okay, so for our questions, you may have addressed a few of these, but our number one question is, why are you not standing up to threats of Social Security and Medicare?
Because there's no threats for, I know that people, ooh. There are no threats for Social Security and Medicare. Nobody is saying, no one has said that they're cutting Social Security.
Elon says it every day.
Well, Elon is not setting policy.
Y'all are following
And I
it.
don't think he said that. I haven't heard him say it. I have not heard him say that once.
Bullshit.
Unelected billionaires. How dare you? So, Social Security is not under threat. But I'll tell you what is under threat if we don't do anything. There won't exist anymore because it's going to go bankrupt. I think the year is 2034. It adjusts and it varies depending on how much money we bring in, etc. So, do you want to? You just want to heckle me, or do you want to talk?
We want you
So
to
here's
tell
the
the
thing: when
truth.
Social Security was initiated in the 30s, there were 43 people working for every beneficiary because it was brand new. Today, that's 3 people working for every beneficiary. This is not Republican or Democrat; it's math. Okay, and then in 2050, no, in 2050 it's going to be 2 to 1. So if we do nothing, it will go bankrupt. So I think we need to be honest, particularly for young people. One of the ways we can fix it is the following: if you're 20 years old, does anybody here really think that a 20-year-old is going to get the same benefits in Social Security that somebody that's taking them now are going to get? Of course they're not going to get it. Listen, I get heckled. I mean, just you can leave. You can have all the freedom of speech you want outside. We're trying to have a conversation.
We talked about this before the congressman arrived. Did we not all agree?
No.
But we did. Keep it respectful like everybody
They
else.
have no choice because that's their belief, whatever.
Then he needs to
The
respect
point is,
us.
there's a whole bunch of, huh?
You need to respect us. Every time you talk about your opposition, you denigrate us and you
My
make fun
tone's
of
not
us.
respectful. My
No,
God.
you're not respectful.
All right. I didn't. So the point is, if we do nothing, so I think one of the, we're not doing it that, we don't do it that way.
Yeah, we know.
Apparently, well, then you're going to leave. So I'm trying to answer questions. There were 250 or so questions already submitted, and I'm trying to be respectful to those people that submitted those questions. And most of them were hostile. So I'm trying to take the damn questions. Okay, Social Security. If we do nothing, it goes bankrupt. So why don't we be honest with younger people and tell them they're not going to retire at 62 or 65? They're just not. The math's not there. So we can lie to you and say, yo, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that will do that. And when they're running for Senate or they're running for president, we're going to have all the money in the world. Austerity is coming if we continue to spend like this. And you can take all of the money from the top 1%. I think that, because again, it varies, it's about $400 billion. We got a $1.85 trillion deficit. That's not going to do it all. So if all these quote unquote evil job producers and creators that make our lives easier and better, you hate billionaires, I'm sure then you hate Apple, and I'm sure you have an Apple phone. Is that hypocritical? I would say so.
Apple isn't
It
a
makes
person,
your life
though.
better. You've got a computer in your hand. This is a wonderful thing. And it was an American invention. Why is that a bad thing? You're going to cap people. Everybody always wants to cap somebody that makes just a little bit more than them. The person making 50 grand thinks the person making 100 grand is wealthy. The person making 100 grand thinks the one making 200 grand is wealthy. And it goes on and on. That's class warfare. It doesn't work. We got free healthcare in Cuba, and Cuba's a horrible place to live. So it's just, anyway, so the way we fix Social Security, one of the ways, is to tell young people, you're gonna get a different deal. So you give them 40 or 50 years notice so they can, they can get a second job, they can save differently. What, do you want the federal government to give them everything? They can't. Federal government creates nothing. They take.
We paid.
They
We
take from all
paid
of
that
us.
money in.
Paid into it.
So that's one of the reasons, this is one of the ways we fix Social Security, is that way. And I know the left's answer, tax the rich. They're already getting taxed.
Yeah.
The top 1% pay 20% of the taxes.
No, they don't.
Okay. What's the next question? So by the way, so there's no plans to cut Social Security. There's no concrete plans right now, and it's both parties' faults for not having to take what should have happened. The person in our, let's say, last 30 years, the president that had the most political capital in any one time, I think it was Barack Obama when he first got elected. He had something like a 75 or 80% approval rating. And I was really hoping, I knew he was socially very liberal, and that's fine. That's his viewpoint in the world. But if he had said, you know what, let's take a bipartisan look at Social Security fixes. I think that was the one opportunity we had. And we're so divided now politically and ideologically that it's difficult to do now. But that's what it's going to take. And then you can blame the math and not point fingers at either party. Next question.
What steps can I take to ensure the Doge findings are acted upon?
Oh, sorry.
What steps can I take to ensure the Doge findings are acted upon?
I think hold us to account. Come to meetings like this. Make sure that your elected representatives act on these things, and we continue. I don't want this to be just a 1-year fad or a 2-year fad. I want it to continue on and really save money and get the government more efficient. Now, I think it's funny and interesting that Elon Musk is being so demonized, and Doge has existed for 2 months. Give him a chance. Give him a chance to see what they do and perform. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
And our
But what
country
if
dies.
it does work? I think he is doing a very good job, and I think it's going to pay tremendous dividends to, again, everybody in this room, regardless of what candidate you vote for. If the government runs more effectively and more efficiently, that's a wonderful thing. I talked to a person who will remain nameless that ran a federal agency, and they said of the 4,000 or 5,000 employees they had, they thought that, in their honest opinion, just very candidly and privately, there were only a few hundred that were really earning their keep. And the rest weren't producing because it just got bloated. The federal government never shrinks, it always grows. And that's an unfortunate thing. And you have to address it, and finally it's being addressed. And as you can see, there's lots of growing pains. When you're over the target, you're gonna get flack. He's getting flack.
What are you doing to ensure that the federal government is not funding NGOs?
All right, so again, we've had 260 questions pre-submitted, so I'm trying to answer some of those. You don't get to cut the line. It's just not fair. It's being un-American. Okay, it's being un-American. All right, we're not gonna, it's unfortunate that you have to.
Yeah, just
take
talk over it,
350
that'll be
people.
okay.
Yeah. What was the,
What are you doing to ensure that the federal government is not
Okay.
funding NGOs?
What are we going to do to ensure that the federal government is not going to fund NGOs? NGOs are non-governmental organizations, and some of them have been very partisan. Many of them have been very partisan of late. And so it's not so much not funding any NGOs, it's making sure that they're very transparent with the funding that they get, and it goes to what they're claiming it's going to go to. I think a lot of the NGOs, and I have some notes on that too I could share with you about what some of the NGOs, usually their names sound great. They sound wonderful, like the American Institute for Liberty and Happiness. Well, who wouldn't want to fund that? But that's not what they're doing. They're doing opposite things. And we want to make sure that any NGO that gets our money is using it not to further any kind of political agenda, because unfortunately there was an instance just recently that was revealed that Stacey Abrams from Georgia, she got $2 billion. There was what we had, it was $2 billion.
Bullshit.
There might have been another instance, but the one I'm referring to had, let's see here.
Isn't it funny how this phone works?
There was, for instance, there was a Climate United Fund, which has long-standing ties with many Democratic officials. They got $7 billion in our tax money right before the end of the Biden administration. The Coalition for Green Capital received $5 billion. This is billions. This is a ton of money. And the Inclusive Network received $1.87 billion, because that sounds nice to be inclusive, but what do? Why is it a problem to ask for an audit on what they spent the money for? Why would that make anybody upset? I don't understand it, because if they're spending it the way they're supposed to, it won't be a problem. The Justice Climate Fund received $940 million. How much money do the people that work for these NGOs make? I'd like to know that. Or is it 300 grand a year? Because I would find that excessive. The Archwell Foundation, founded by none other than Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, received $12 million for the purpose of redistributing those funds to other NGOs. So we abdicated our responsibility and said, you know what, Prince Harry, you figure out which NGOs you want to give it to. And then once the NGOs get the money, we don't know who they give it to. The Climate Justice Alliance, doesn't that sound good? Climate Justice Alliance, okay, which funded pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel propaganda campaigns, received $50 million from the EPA for the purpose of fighting climate change. I don't think they fought climate change with that $50 million. So those are the things that I'm talking about. So we've got to hold them to account, and if they don't spend the money the way they're supposed to, there should be repercussions, both civil and criminal.
Is Russia a hostile foreign power to U.S. national interest and therefore a threat to our nation?
Yes.
100%. There's no doubt about it. They wouldn't be such a threat if they didn't have 5,000 nuclear weapons, but they do. And so it's in a perfect world they would have 0, but they have 5,000. And Putin is nothing but an authoritarian dictator. I'm banned, by the way, from going to Russia. It was the first time I saw my name in the Cyrillic alphabet. I'd never seen, I knew what it looked like before. But he's already lost in so many ways. There's an 830-mile new border with NATO and Russia because of his actions. Nobody unites NATO more like, quite like Vladimir Putin. One of the Estonian generals that I talked to, I have to give him credit for that quote, and it's true and accurate. I would have never thought growing up that we would ever say NATO Finland. I would have never thought, there's a term, Finlandization, for a reason. NATO Sweden. Now we're saying those. How about this one? Finally, Germany, who've been, to be fair, freeloading on the United States and our taxpayer dollars for decades, is now finally spending, you don't think so? See, that fascinates me, that some on the left think they agreed in 2012 to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. Germany agreed to that. They signed the document, and they didn't do it. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because your word's supposed to be your bond. They didn't do it. You know who the third largest economy in the world is? Germany's. They got plenty of money. So why don't they step up as well? Spain, Canada, Italy, not spending either. Finally, Germany hit that goal. I find it very interesting that the closer you get to the threat in Europe, which is Russia, the more that percentage goes up. Ukraine, before the invasion, was spending 4.4% of their GDP on defense. Ireland, all the way over here, away from that threat on that nice island with those nice people, drinking those nice Guinness. They have 7,400 people in their armed forces. Their goal is 11,500. They have two ships and no surface radar, because they're away from the threat. Now, we have two big oceans, but the world's a very small place now. But we have a moat called the Pacific. We have a moat called the Atlantic. I don't want us to become isolationists like we did after World War I, because it was a big mistake, and we got 20 years later World War II. So it's a different world. But what I do want, and I do believe that NATO is the most successful military alliance in human history, I want our allies to live up to the agreements that they signed. It's very fair. And now people will say, well, Donald Trump doesn't like NATO. No, he did it in a kind of sandpaper fashion way, but he said, I want you to fulfill your commitments as well. Pete Hegseth,
Drunk.
thank you.
Yeah, drunk.
Pete was saying to us, I take people at their word until they prove me otherwise, that we are committed to NATO. We just want NATO to be committed to NATO. I think that's a fair and kind of clever way to put
I
it.
know.
This is going to make some of the folks in this audience laugh, but bear with me. I think the best thing that could have happened to Ukraine is to have President Trump win that election in November. I really do. And but seriously, in all seriousness, this is why. Because I do want Ukraine to win. I do want them to rid themselves of that corruption. I do want them to integrate into the West. And I do want people to get a bloody nose. And I do want China to watch. Because I do not want China to cross those straits and invade Taiwan. Because we could get into a hot war with a nation that's got the second largest economy and 1.4 billion people. It's called deterrence. And I want to deter. So you want me to go beyond honesty and talk about frankness and candor? I'll do that.
No.
This is the honest to God truth. Joe Biden is never going to run for political office again, so I'm not trying to score political points. Yeah, we can clap to that. But here's the deal. He fumbled the ball on Ukraine. And I will say this, in my humble opinion, the House Democrat, well, I should say the Hill Democrats and the Hill Republicans got it right. We knew, I can't tell how or why or the methods, but 6 months prior, we knew that invasion was going to happen and we couldn't say a damn word. Couldn't say anything. But what we could do is write letters to the executive branch saying, hey, why don't we send some more key weapons to Ukraine so we don't have to have a war to begin with, which would have saved the American taxpayer in the neighborhood of $175 billion if the war had never kicked off. And he dragged his feet for months, and I don't know why. That is just a fact. And I would always say that when I was doing interviews, that the legislative branch got it right, executive fumbled. And it's unfortunate. And you need bold leadership, and we didn't have it at the time. So, what I'd like to see is, and I think what ultimately, we'll get to other questions. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but what will ultimately happen is, and I've talked to you. I'm on the intelligence committee, and we had a meeting, non-classified meeting with Ukrainian generals. And my question to them was, because I was very curious, what does peace look like to you? Realistically, what does peace look like? And they said, well, we're not going to get that land back that Russia stole, which is, again, terribly unfortunate and is a tragedy, because Russia's got 4 times the population. They don't have the same values that we have. They don't value human life. At least, I'm not saying Russian people, Putin and the government. They got so many landmines and so many trenches on that territory they stole. How does a country that only has 40 million people get it back from a country with 160 million people? It's difficult and it's hard. And you let it go on, we keep feeding them $40 and $50 billion a year, and it goes on 5 or 6 more years, they're gonna be in a way worse position because they're gonna continue to lose territory. So it's about having boldness and saying, look, let's end it now. They're 83% intact. I would love to get some of that territory back. There should be fast track membership to the EU for them, and there should be some kind of security guarantees, because what they don't want is for there to be a peace accord, and then 3 years later, Russia just invades again. Because they're back at square one. So there's got to be something that deters him from doing it again.
So we would give up Florida if we were attacked.
If you endorse reducing or eliminating Medicaid, how do you propose we help children, elderly, and disabled who rely on this safety net?
I don't endorse getting rid of Medicaid at all. A great society is judged by how it treats its weakest citizens, or at least its most vulnerable citizens. John Kennedy said that, and I believe that. There's a role for the federal government, there's a role for the state government, there's a role for local government. One of the roles when I was in the Texas Senate was when you've got younger people that have terrible afflictions. I remember having a town hall in Sherman, and when a gal came and she had a Hillary Clinton t-shirt on, and she had her daughter who, her body was absolutely crumpled, it had betrayed her, and she had a sharp mind. And it's very expensive to care for a child like that. I think she was in her late teens. And she couldn't get the help that she needed. She was on a waiting list. And she said, I've been on this waiting list for like 8 years. And she was very skeptical that we'd help her. And we were able to help her, and thankfully she immediately got the care. Within a couple of weeks, she got the care that she needed. I did that because she needed the help. I didn't do that. I was in a district where the Republican candidate would win 75 to 25 regardless of what you did, whether or not you helped her. I helped her because it's the right thing to do. I don't need applause for it. Just because you do your job, you shouldn't get applause. You should say, damn it, you did your job good. Sorry for that cuss. But you could say damn it in hell on the Love Boat in the 70s, so I figure that's not a cuss. Anyway, be that as it may. And so I'm not supporting it. I've never heard President Trump or any Republican say that we're gonna eliminate Medicare or Medicaid. I think that's silly. I think it's hyperbolic. What we do want to do is catch the fraud, waste, and abuse to make sure that we can provide services to the folks that need it. So that's a pretty easy question.
How do congressmen and congresswomen end up with high net worths on congressional pay?
That's a great question. That's an awesome question. So here's the brass tacks. We get paid $174,000 a year, and I say, well, I was going to say, oh, hell, I'll just say it candidly. To some of us, that was a pay cut, and to some, it was a pay raise. It tends to be on the Republican side, it's a pay cut, and the Democratic side, it's a pay raise. My parents were Democrats, so I'm not saying that to insult Democrats, but just the people that serve on the Hill, it seems like that was the case, and overwhelmingly, in fact. We get our pension, by the way, you've read online, I'm sure, that we get full pension if we just serve one term. It's completely false. It's not true. We get you're not vested until you serve 6 years, so I'm not even vested yet. So if I were to leave and retire or get thrown out or resign, I would get nothing, no pension at all. You get, if you last the 6 years, you get $1,740 times years of service. So if you serve for 10 years, your pension is 17 grand. Not exactly whopping. So I just think that that's one of the, and it's not free health care either. In fact, the state, if you serve in the state legislature for 12 years, you do get free health care the rest of your life, just you and your family. But that does not happen in the federal government. So just kind of FYI there. So how do they get so rich on 174 grand? That's a great question. I don't know, because I'm poorer now than I was 5 years ago when I won this seat. And if some people didn't believe it, because when I ran for election in the Republican primary in 2022, there were some hit pieces about I was this big stock trader and Gordon Gekko and all this business. So that stopped when two things happened. One, I gave them my stock portfolio that I bought and sold while in Congress. And in fact, we had a town hall in Plano, and there was a fella sat right up front. He clearly didn't agree with me politically, and he gave me scowls and scrolls. And then when he got to ask his question, he asked about that. And I said, well, he said, I'm a forensic accountant, and I'm really upset that you were stock trading and making all this money. And I said, well, actually, I have my entire stock portfolio, it was thick like this, and I've lost $800,000 since I've been in Congress trading stocks, and I can give it to you, and the only thing I redacted was the account number. And he took it, and for the rest of the town hall, he was in the back with one of my staffers just to make sure he didn't pocket any of the stuff. He didn't, he was an honest fella. And at the end of it, he came back, and I said, well, what did you think? After 90 minutes of him looking at it, he said, do not take stock advice from Pat Fallon.
Exactly.
It's true. And so then, just to stop it all together, because I used to do trading way before I got to Congress, I just have not bought or sold a stock in 3.5 years, and I'm not going to do it. I just didn't want the hassle. And furthermore, I was really bad at it. So, and I think that we should have a ban on individual stock trading for every single member of Congress.
And the president.
I filed that bill, and it's problematic to some people, and I'm trying to get bipartisan support on it because they say, well, what if my spouse works for some big company and she gets stock options, or you get, so you got to write good legislation, but we shouldn't be trading. And I've never heard of it. I have never gotten any inside information, save one time. And it was a time when we knew that Putin was going to invade Ukraine. And that was 6 months prior to him doing it. So if you were to do those kind of nefarious things to enrich yourself, you could have and should have put all of your money in energy stocks, because they were going to go up, and they did double as soon as the war kicked off. And of course, I didn't do that. I didn't do it at all. I had the knowledge of it, didn't act on it. Unfortunately, some members act on it. So they should be held to account. That's why we should ban stock trading, so we never have to talk about this again. I know that Ms. Pelosi's worth a whole pile of money, but you know what? I got to see it with my own eyes to really comment on it. I think it's problematic, and if you're constantly picking the right stocks, you probably know something. Okay? Or you're the luckiest person in the world.
Or you write a book.
If you're picking individual stocks and they always hit, I'm not talking about buying, funds and mutuals, because they, over time, they average about 10%, and that's what you should be doing. By the way, don't invest in individual stocks. I think you should do a broad-based investment approach, but don't take advice from me.
what happens to students in poverty and with disabilities when the Department of Education had been gutted by Musk?
So let's, again, I like data. We all have, listen, we're all human beings. We make mistakes, we err, we have our preconceived notions, we prejudge. So I really try to always take a step back and say, I want to begin with doubts, so then you can end in certainties, rather than the other way around. A lot of people end in certainties, and they begin in certainties, they end in doubts. So let's talk about the Department of Education, because it sounds great. You have a Department of Education. My parents they passed away now, were retired school teachers. Education is invaluable. I grew up in a house that cost $13,000. It just recently sold for $70,000 in the Northeast. So I came from humble beginnings, but my parents focused on education. That was what was going to get you out of this situation, and you're going to live your dreams with education. Work hard, be honest, and study. So incredibly valuable. But does the Department of Education further goals and performance in the classroom? I think it's a very important question. When you look at the data, no. Classroom performance in the 60s and 70s is exactly the same as it is today. It's flat. Didn't get worse, it didn't get better. We went to the moon before there was ever a Department of Education. It is a state, in my humble opinion, is a state and local issue. I trust the school boards, I trust the electorates that elect those school boards, I trust the state officials to educate our children. You don't need bureaucrats in Washington to meddle. So what we would do with the money that was spent, that was budgeted for the Department of Education, is give that to the states and block grants. That is better for the states. It's going to ultimately be better for the students.
If you endorse widespread government job cuts, how do you plan to protect our vital government agency services?
Well, the vital government agencies, because I think about this quite a bit, and like air traffic controllers have one of the hardest jobs in the world. There are lives at stake. They hold the souls of so many people in their hands daily, hourly, and there's pressure. And they're underpaid. So you have to really recognize the certain functions. Certain functions are absolutely critical and certain functions are fat. It's just that simple. And in any organization, when they get big, sometimes, like you saw it with X, formerly known as Twitter, Musk bought it. And I think he said he fired somewhere or laid off 85%. It's amazing, it still functions, it still works. How is that possible? You would think, with the notion of more is better, if you have more employees, you're somehow going to be more efficient and perform your mission better, that would be impossible. How could you perform your mission and lose 85% of your workforce? Well, they did it. And I'm not saying that drastically, I don't know what the number is going to be per agencies, but there are certain federal agencies that have just got bloated over time. There's a fascinating book that I encourage you to read called Washington Goes to War by David Brinkley. And what he talked about was Washington, D.C. was a sleepy southern town before World War II. And World War II transformed that city and the federal government into the behemoth that has become. And it's finally time to address it. Or again, we can do nothing, continue to work on $2 trillion deficits, because what a deficit is the canyon between your receipts and your expenditures, and what the debt is that accumulation, which is now $36 trillion. And I always hesitate to say the number because it's ever changing. I don't know why our Democrat and liberal friends aren't angry about that. They just don't seem to be too concerned. Now, to be fair, they'll say, Donald Trump had deficits. Yeah, he did. And again, the 2 years prior to COVID, because his third year COVID hit, those 2-3 years prior, because it's fiscal years, not calendar years, the deficits were about $700 billion. And then when you look at Joe Biden, after we got out of COVID, his were 1.7 trillion. They were like $1 trillion worse. So we weren't balancing the budget under Republican administrations, but it was worse with Obama and it was worse with Biden. Now, Clinton, yes, and it's true. You can look at the numbers. Now, you can say Bill Clinton, because we had surpluses then. We had surpluses then because it was the 1990s, and we had something called the internet. And an invention like that occurs about every 500 years. It's like movable type. And anybody that was president at the time would have seen surpluses because everybody remember that? They were leaving their jobs or they had a side hustle and they were going to become an internet millionaire. So billionaires are evil. Are millionaires evil? Or is it just billionaires? But I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. But so anyway, next question.
What's going to happen to those who are committing fraud in our entitlement programs?
Well, I think we touched on that they have to be held to account. Currently, again, what I said in Texas anyway, when they get caught, I do need to share this with you because I found this fascinating. When any medical provider gets audited that receives Medicare or Medicaid funds, mostly Medicaid funds, I asked the IG years ago, what percentage of those folks that get audited the next month bill lower their in Medicare or Medicaid? And he said 100%. All of them. That's scary. And then they went on to further say that the Russian mob, obviously now it's more difficult because of them being at war and their foreign nationals being repatriated, but this was prior to the Ukrainian war years ago. The Russian mob in Manhattan alone was stealing $800 million in Medicaid fraud. If you think about it, if you're a Russian mobster, what the heck you want to sling heroin for? You could get killed, you could go to jail for 20, 30 years. If you can make more money robbing the federal government with Medicaid fraud, you would do that. And if you get caught, which very few of them do, you're going to serve maybe a couple years in federal prison that has tennis courts. And that's why they gravitated toward that. So I, again, would hope that we could all join forces to eliminate organized crime stealing our money in the Medicaid program. So
do it.
IRS has long wait times for calls and emails. How is cutting the workforce going to help that?
if you can't, think about this for a second, because I know it might sound counterintuitive to some people, but if you can't fire somebody, do you think all over time, maybe that one person, but if you have 100 people that when you hire them, you can't fire them, are they gonna work really efficiently and really hard? Now there's always, because it's just human dynamics, 10, 20 of those 100 people will always work really hard no matter what. And there are 10 or 20 that aren't gonna do anything no matter what. And everybody else is kind of in the middle. So if you have accountability where you work really hard, you get rewarded. This is why my parents and I always disagreed with this on this, but I like merit pay for school teachers. Because everybody in here knows, I don't care if you're 8 years old or you're 80 years old, you knew the best teachers you've ever had. You remember them. You remember the ones from elementary school and junior high or middle school and high school because they changed your life. If they all make the same amount, that's just patently unfair. The best salespeople make the most money. The best athletes make the most money. The best producers, if you have inventions that you have patents on, you're going to get rewarded for that financially. That's a good thing because socialism and communism does not work. Capitalism works. Capitalism is the one economic form that has ripped mankind, humankind, out of poverty. It's just a fact. So it might be an inconvenient fact for some folks, but it's true. So.
It's only leaving the good people because of the very productive.
All right, so you want people that produce, and you want folks, so holding the IRS to account, I've always had kind of a apprehension with bureaucrats because they are so largely unaccountable. I saw that when, I don't want to get into it, but there's people that you can't get rid of a lot of federal employees. So they should be accountable and the good ones should be rewarded and the bad ones should be let go. And I want you to perform. I want you to take those phone calls. I want you to get back to the folks that you actually work for, which is everybody in this room. We should all demand that from them.
Why are you supporting Trump cutting VA services when vets have given everything for our country?
I'm not supporting that. The president's not supporting that. And again, if you get rid of people that work at the Veterans Administration that weren't doing their jobs, that's not hurting veterans at all. That's helping veterans. Again, demand it. When you get treated poorly as a vet when you go into a VA hospital because they take you for granted because they know they can't get fired, they need to go, not you. And for anybody to sit there and side with that bum that won't take care of our veterans, shame on you. I should have brought a sign that said shame on you because that's ridiculous. I'm for veterans, I am a veteran, and that's what we're gonna do, is we're gonna service veterans, and we're gonna hold everybody to account. Just like we all are when we're in the private workforce, when we're in the private sector. If you perform, you get rewarded. If not, you're out. That's the way it should be with the feds as well.
I'm concerned that we are alienating our allies for no strategic purpose. I want to know what the plan is.
Again, I think that's a very good question, and it's not a concern that I share because I think the press twists what the president does and says. NATO is, as I mentioned earlier, the most successful military alliance we have. A really good question is, and think about this, when in World War II, we took on Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany synchronously. At that time, we had about, I think we had more, the population was about on parity. We had a few more people than them combined, but our economy dwarfed theirs combined. And that was the greatest challenge we've had in our country. Now, we have an adversary in China that has our economy is larger, but theirs is close to peer, and they have 4 times the people we do. That is a concern. That frightens me, that scares me. And Xi Jinping has consolidated power more so than any Chinese leader since Mao Zedong. And you saw what happened under Mao Zedong. About 100 million souls were lost due to his policies by mission and commission. So it's a dangerous world. And that, we need alliances. We met with the Australian head of their secret, basically their intelligence service. And Australia is a country, 25, 30 million people, small, good economy, in a strategic region. But China's trying to bully them and everyone else. And if China ever does become the only preeminent power and the only superpower left, it's going to be a very dark day for humanity. I remember as a child in 1980, it was remember when you were the remote, when you were like the 10-year-old or the 8-year-old, and they go change the channel and they had the big box TV, it was this wide and deep, and they would change the channel. And on the news program, it said that, this was in 1980, China wants to be a superpower by 2025. Well, they were 10 years early. Because nobody thought in 1980 that could even happen, and it did. So we have to be very cognizant of that moving forward. And you know what their strategy is? They don't want the hot war with us over Taiwan. They want American malaise. They want us to continue to divide, continue to spend like drunken sailors, pardon, insult to drunken sailors, and just get weaker, and by attrition they win. We can't let that happen. That's why we need bold leadership to get our finances in order, to get our military in order, to make it dojin, make it efficient. We need to get rid of a lot of these legacy systems. Look at the war. You would have never thought 20 years ago, where was the safest place to be on a battlefield? Arguably, main battle tank, inside that. What's now? You want to be in a main battle tank now in Ukraine, on either side? Heck no. You wouldn't think that now we're fighting it with drones, we're fighting it with hypersonic missiles. China, Russia, ahead of us in hypersonic missiles. That was a classified statement I just made 2 years ago. And then, some people talked about it and it became open sourced. We have to look at this, and we need to be, we're the greatest military today. We need to make sure we're the greatest military tomorrow. And that's something we need to do together.
But what does that have to do with alienating?
No doubt. You know what my fear is? My fear is if NATO were to collapse, and then we go to war with China, we're all alone. And we've been carrying NATO for 80, or most of our European allies for 80 years. Yeah, absolutely we need allies. And the allies, fortunately, are now stepping up because of that threat, because of the threat that Russia presents.
What does any of that have to
He
do
said
with
5 minutes. I go, yeah. I GPS the next thing. It takes 1 hour and 6 minutes to get there. It starts at 7:30. We got some
You didn't answer
time.
the question.
Do you support a complete audit of of federal government spending?
Yeah, and like Elon Musk was talking about this. It's difficult because the federal government doesn't work like a business, so it's not as easy to audit. They should, by the way, work like a business. But you can audit it, but you have to be different. You have to be patient, but you have to also be persistent because you don't want to start an audit and then political winds change and then there's no more audit. You have to make sure that it's in statute, so it is cradle to grave, begins and ends, and that would be so. Yeah, and not only I'm talking all the federal government, military, non-military, Congress, all of it.
I'm all for cutting government waste and excess, but would it make sense to hire actual auditors and not the world's richest man and his cronies?
Well, the problem with that question is the premise is wrong. We're paying Elon Musk nothing. You know how many Doge employees there are total right now? Like 100. 2.4 million, and you're going to be concerned about 100? Why? Because the press tells you, because you watch too much MSNBC, and they say, be scared. It's Doge. It's Elon Musk. He's an unelected billionaire. I can't be respectful to MSNBC. So anyway, my point is it's perpetual lies. My point is 200. You were freaked out about 200 people. Why? 2.4 million. I'll pay 200 to check on 2.4 million any day, and I want to see the results. If the results after a year aren't, let's say, fruitful or don't show a lot of savings, then we can get rid of Doge. But I suspect that 55 billion, if it's not spot on accurate, it's close. And that's a lot of money. Because you know what 200 federal employees don't cost? 55 billion after 2 months. So the math, I'm sorry the folks that are here and hate Doge, the math's not with you. The math is completely against you. And that's just a fact. And we're gonna find out moving forward. So again, beware of cognitive dissonance. If you think something and then you're proven false, you should accept that. We're not there yet because it's too small sample size. I suspect we will. And we'll do another one of these. I love doing these. And I think largely I want to thank everybody here because you've been very respectful. And I do understand it is difficult when someone's got a microphone and is yapping for an hour and you don't agree with them to sit civilly. I get it. It sucks. Sorry, but I don't know if that's a cuss. You could say that on Love Boat 2 in the 70s. So that's kind of my cuss standard. But anyway, and now we got a lot of really, I thought, some of them are pretty nasty and really difficult questions, and I was going to try to answer all of them in a machine gun format.
Why don't you answer a couple
You might
of
enjoy that.
questions?
But hey, Austin, where are those really mean ones? Are they up here?
Let people here talk. Let them answer questions. Why can't we ask questions?
Well, here's the thing. You think those were easy questions? I think they were too. Yeah. First of all, this is the way we've done it for 7 years because we had people try to hijack the mic and make speeches. I think it's fair to ask questions, so we ask people to write about it in index cards, and we'll answer them. And most town halls, when I'm not an hour late, and I apologize again due to an American airline, we try to answer literally every single question because I think that's fair, and that's the most efficient way. I guess I've dozed myself. It's the most efficient way to answer all the questions. Do we have the? Sure.
Have there been any updates on President Trump's assassination attempt back in July of 2024?
What was the
That's
question?
not one in the nasty section.
Assassination attempt.
So very, very as quickly as I can. There was bipartisan support on reforming the Secret Service because they obviously failed dramatically on July 13th in Butler. I went up to Butler and saw it, and there were like 9 or 10 terrible breakdowns. I don't care who the President of the United States is, you shouldn't have somebody get 150 yards with a scoped rifle unabated. That's not good. If we start doing that, if President Trump had been killed, God forbid what would have happened to this country. It would have been awful, because I think it started with tit for tat could have begun, and God knows what we could have descended into. I want our leaders protected. I wanted Joe Biden protected, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, all of them. When you martyr people, it's never good for anyone. And there were serious breakdowns, and what we found was mostly it was due to complacency. Absolute terrible, almost to a criminal degree, and the leadership was awful. Cheetah was not the right person for that job. Unfortunately, she resigned the very next day after oversight really, threw her into a proverbial and figurative wood chipper. And now we've got folks that are running the agency that are willing to look and do things differently. Embrace technology. The incident with in Palm Beach on the golf course, if they just had canine units, that guy was there for 12 hours in the bushes with firearms. If you had patrolled with canine units, every 3-4 hours, they literally would have sniffed him out. and they didn't do that. They actually have robo-dogs now that can do that too, and robo-dogs, you don't need to feed them. They can just continually do it. So it's unfortunate that that happened, but I'm confident that the Secret Service can be the elite protection agency we all grew up thinking they were. We thought they learned their lessons after John Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan. They didn't. We thought they may have learned their lesson after July 13th, and a couple weeks later they didn't. And then quite frankly, on September 11th, when there was that ceremony, and the acting director, Rowe, was standing behind Joe Biden, they still didn't learn those lessons. That guy didn't have a vest on, he didn't go to the operational briefing, he didn't have a radio, he hadn't been trained in firearm use, real firearm use in 18 years. Why was he standing behind Joe Biden? Because he wanted a photo op. He put Joe Biden's life in danger. He put Kamala Harris's life in danger because their special agents in charge all had to move. That should have been bipartisan. So when I called them out on that, most of the folks on the left roasted me simply because I was a Republican. That was not a partisan issue, and by the way, they don't all have to be. And I think the Texas legislature does a very good job at that. We got the nasty ones? Where are they all? I can't even see. I can't see it with my glasses. So.
Who approved Doge and Musk? Oh, what?
Oh, daylight savings time. I'm gonna file a bill to keep the time the way it is right now, forever. I know some people want it. Some people want it. No, I just like it. I like the days to be longer. That's just me. That's how I'm gonna file it. And so we'll see. Wasting time. I've been here. I'm trying to stay as long as humanly possible.
Who approved Doge and Musk?
The American people with 77.3 million votes November 5th.
How can an unelected individual be given such power over government institutions that were created by our Congress?
President Trump, Article 2, Section 1 is the President of the United States. The executive power rests in him. He appointed Elon Musk to help him fulfill his mission that he ran on, by the way. And that's one of the things, I think one of the best attributes of Donald Trump is, love him or hate him, is the way he campaigns is the way he legislates, the way he governs, period. It's not some bait and switch. You've been very patient and very respectful. What is your question?
What future do you envision for the United States in 50 years' time?
What kind of future do I envision the United States in 50 years' time? It depends. I mean, it can go one of two ways. It can be, I think our jobs, whoever you elect in Congress or the Senate and for president, our main job should be that the United States will be more powerful and stronger and more prosperous tomorrow than they are today. And that's what we should all be working toward. And not to just get reelected and cater and pander to folks for their votes. So we could go one of two ways. It could be a very dark time if it goes negative, if we don't address the spending. And because what happens, by the way, folks, if we don't address the spending, we're gonna hit austerity. It will happen. Because the dollar will cease to become the reserve currency of the planet. And once that occurs, look at what happened to Ireland, look what happened to Greece, look what happened to other European countries. When they go to austerity, and I think our debt to GDP ratio, again, it fluctuates so much, it was like at 128%, which is alarmingly awful. Then when you have austerity, all these social services we're talking about, Medicare, Medicaid, gone. I mean, they'll have names, there'll be some services, but it'll be like Cuba level, Venezuela level. We are spending $1 trillion a year to service the debt. Think about if we didn't have that debt in a perfect world. We know what $1 trillion is? 1,000 billions. Imagine every child in this country that's between the ages of 18 and 22 could go to a state college tuition free, all of them, and you'd have money left over. But we continue to just worry about our next elections, and that debt continues to grow, and then there's a major political party that doesn't want to address it at all, and the Republicans we talk about it, well, we don't do too much either. We need to try to address it together, because otherwise it'll never happen. You only have two shots at this when we have a united Republican government right now. And we can pass one bill a year without filibuster, it's called reconciliation. That's the only chance you have to fix it. and I hope that we can at least get us along the right path. I want to have a real quick question for somebody that never voted for me and hates me, or dislikes me politically. You were really respectful. Go ahead, ma'am.
I heard that an airplane goes to Afghanistan every week with $40 million. And then I heard that there was a bill set forward to say that no taxpayer money could go to terrorists. Do you know anything about that?
Okay, so the question was, there's a plane that she's claiming there's a plane that's every week that goes to Afghanistan with $40 million, I would presumably for the Taliban, and you get this administration saying no money for terrorists, no working with terrorists. Is that a fair
There was a
assessment?
bill, someone was putting forth a bill to say no taxpayer money can go to terrorists to stop.
Yeah, I think obviously I'm all for no taxpayer money going to terrorists. I don't know about any planes going to Afghanistan carrying $40 million. This is the first I've heard of it. But we have staff members here. If you have any further information, we can certainly look into it and open a congressional inquiry on it. But anybody that was very respectful, sir, you didn't heckle or anything, go ahead. Thank you for your service. I saw that. Yes, sir. Oh, Don's great. Yeah, he's awesome.
I've been a recipient of the Baby Hospital, the Dallas Hospital, and the Bonham Hospital for many years. I've had a wonderful service. I ran into a lot of veterans that have taken care of me, and I just want to say that as a shout out to the VA system. I've never ran into a lazy person. I love Bonham. They take good care of us up here.
Well, and thank you for your service. And that was not a difficult question. We fought like heck to make sure that the Bonham Hospital stayed open. And I don't know if you were here when we had the meeting, and we were able to do that. So, no, I'm not saying. Look, when you have any public sector employee that works their tail off and earns their keep, they are gold coins because they make our country better. That's all we're looking for. And just because we check under the hood, it doesn't mean that there's going to be mass layoffs, or at least folks that were working hard. You're crazy if you have a great employee not to keep them. Every single person that comes in our office that is in business in the private sector, every one of them have one thing in common. Doesn't matter what they do. They are starving for labor. They have lots of opportunities. They don't have enough people. All of them say the same thing. So they're all fighting for employees. And they just want folks that'll obviously do the mission that they're paid for. So we just want to do that at the federal level as well. Sir?
Do you support the CHIPS Act?
Do I support the CHIPS Act? In theory, yes. The way that particular CHIPS Act that we voted on a couple years ago, there were a lot of poison pills in it. There was money to the Chinese Communist Party, believe it or not, or at least went to go to Beijing. You got to read the bill. It was a very long bill. And so, yeah, if I could have done a line item veto on about 20 of the lines, I would have voted for it. But there were some that just weren't. So yes, we need to make semiconductors. I love what's happening in Arizona. I love what's happening in Sherman. We need to make those advanced semiconductors in this country and not rely on, Taiwan I think makes 94% of them right now, 92, 94%. Because what if there is a hot war? What if China does either destroy that facility or capture it? Where are we going to be? Because you're going to be without a new car anyway, for 3 years. Things of that nature. And that's why Taiwan's so important. It's not just the 23 million people on that island. It's not just that they're an ally. It's that they have, functional, really, if you would forgive the analogy, like, modern day gold and platinum in those chips. And if they get captured by the Chinese, they can hold the whole world economy hostage for 2 to 3 years. So yeah, we need to make more of it domestically. And if you have to put some federal money behind it, yes, because it's just a core function of national security. So it's a good question. We got one more and then we're gonna run. Sir, way in the back, is it gonna be hard? You didn't vote for me? Anybody that didn't vote for me? Okay, go ahead.
How do you stand on term limits after you reach the point of vesting in your pension?
How do I stand on term limits for Congress? I've always filed bills for term limits. I love term limits, but here's the thing. You don't want them, in my humble opinion, too short, because then the bureaucracy just becomes even more powerful. So I think somewhere in that 12-year range, give or take, is a good time frame, because I've been for 4 years, and when you're in federal, whether it's state government, federal government, local government, I've been in all three, it's like a language, and it takes a while to become fluent in that language. And you don't want somebody to become fluent and then they have to go. So you want to make sure it's that right time frame. But you don't need to be in the same job for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. You amass so much power. Now, people that are against term limits will say, but we have term limits every election, and in our case, we get elected every 2 years. But when you, listen, there's a power of incumbency. There just is. And I ran against a 17-year incumbent when I ran for the Texas Senate. And if I didn't have personal resources, I couldn't have beaten him because it was just costly to do. We did because he wasn't serving the people well, but it would be nearly impossible because he was going to spend $2.5 million of lobby money to get reelected. Now, how are you going to fight that when you have 87,000 people spread out over 14 counties that are going to vote? You're going to knock on that many doors? You can't in that time frame. So because of the power of incumbency, I do believe in term limits. But will we ever get there? It's got to be a constitutional change, and good luck with that. You got to get 2/3 of both houses and 38 states to ratify. So you've been respectful. Go ahead. You did not vote for me, and you will not vote for me.
I did not vote for you.
Okay, good. Ask the question.
So national security and internship positions are being canceled despite being exempted in the executive order. What are you guys going to do?
But give me an example of that, because we've been asking. Excuse me?
Canceled.
Go ahead.
My Department of State internship's been canceled. I know people who are working for.
Your Department of State internship has been canceled.
Yeah, and a bunch of other of my friends who. are
Okay,
working
I would
for-
just not, respectfully, it's an internship in the Department of State, so I wouldn't say that's critical to national security like military, air traffic controller, this and that. I'm not saying it doesn't have value,
I do know people
but as
in
far
the
as
DoD who
critical.
also had their internships and like full-time jobs canceled. So I'm wondering what. You
No, there's definitely gonna be internships canceled, and there's gonna be people that get fired or laid off, for sure. But in those critical law enforcement, the ones I read, immigration, the military, air traffic control, those haven't been touched. And we've asked those agencies, and we haven't had any of those higher echelon employees tell us that they've had any cuts in their agencies at all.
But do they have a right to do it?
What do you think Trump's long-term tariff strategy is going to be?
What do I think Trump's long-term tariff strategy is going to be? I honestly don't know. I hope he can win. We have some. We have to take into account China. So China's been ripping us off. He used to say that when he was on Oprah in the 80s, right? Or 90s, that they are, and they are. And I think you need to pick and choose. I'm a free trade guy. I love free trade. But let's be honest too. And look in the mirror, and we're all guilty of it. We got addicted to really cheap goods. Really cheap goods. We're addicted to it, and then we may have to a little bit wean ourselves off it. But you don't want to. I like one front wars, or one front conflicts, or one front challenges, and so you got to pick and choose your battles. I think it's a negotiating tactic, and sometimes he says very bold things to get people's attention, and it works. Canada has a trade surplus with us, if I'm not mistaken. So does Mexico. So they need us more than we need them, and we have a far larger economy. And the larger your economy is, the more stable you're going to be when you have some, trade fights, quite frankly. So I'd like to see us, I'd like to see them resolved as quickly as possible, because I don't want to see inflation, and I do want to see economic growth. But what you've also seen, though, is a lot of manufacturing, or at least I shouldn't say a lot. Some manufacturing, significant amounts, are starting to onshore because of the tariffs, because they don't want to deal with it. So it's way too early to tell what will happen, and we've got to monitor and go forward. So I like winning. You've been great.
I have it written down, so it should be kind of quick. It's about the Department of Education.
Well, it's a whole page. I can't do
No,
it.
it's this right here.
All right.
It says, if you stand for government accountability, efficiency, and right-sizing the government, how does this relate to the Department of Education and protecting the rights of students with disabilities, or those that need to, by enforcing anti-discrimination protections for students at the federal level? Because as you said, there's different,
The federal government doesn't educate any children, though.
I didn't say
Okay.
education, but how, even if it's not under that, how do you respond to anti-discrimination for children and students?
So respectfully, I would refer to an answer I gave earlier, which is you take the entire budget, or nearly all of the Department of Education budget, you block grant it per capita and give it to the states, and you leave it to the states. So thank you, and folks. You know what I know? I know that I grew up in Massachusetts. Pardon me for that. I left the People's Republic of Massachusetts and sought asylum in the Republic of Texas. But be that as it may, that a lot of people will say when they talk about education, well, Massachusetts has such a successful public education system vis-a-vis and compared to Texas, because look at the the performance and look at the test scores. But again, that's not comparing apples to apples. I grew up there. Massachusetts has a large white population, okay? And some of the, and we can go on, we can have another whole town hall just on challenges of making sure, regardless of your ethnicity, you perform and all that. When you don't have, there's challenges when you just get here and you don't speak the language. And Texas has different challenges with a lot of ESL kids that Massachusetts simply doesn't have. So when you take just white Massachusetts students and compare them to white Texas students, it's the same. So I think, and they spend almost twice as much money. So are they more successful, or they just spend more money? I think that they have different challenges. Furthermore, we're 30 million people, and they're about 6.5, so it's not comparing apples to apples. So I really do, now I've really hit the time limit, because I don't want to go to the left. I don't know students being discriminated against. We already have a myriad of laws that protect all people. I think we have that enforcement as well. Clearly, you have it civilly and criminally as well. Folks, thanks so much. I appreciate it.